Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is the show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. What's going on, y'all? It's Adam, and today I'm running solo today because I've got something I need to get off my chest when it comes down to what I'm seeing and the industry as a whole. There's been a lot of chatter lately about the English language proficiency, about non-domicile CDLs, about who belongs in the industry and who doesn't. On paper, it looks like a safety conversation, but let's be honest, it's starting to sound a little like something else, something that has more to do with identity, immigration, and comfort zones than it does with compliance as a whole. So I'm going to dive in today. I'm going to pull the curtain back. I want to kind of give some insight on this ELP debate, calling out what's being said and what's not being said, and holding us all accountable to lead better, speak clearer, and protect the future of trucking for everybody who's out there doing it right. So I want to really just kind of dive in and talk about it. So um, let me go ahead and just say this and just really kind of just lead off with where I see things. I've been in this industry 25 years in October. I started driving a truck back in 2000, and I've had a lot of time that I spent on the road between then and now, and I got to see a lot of things. I saw everything from the lens of a driver to the lens of a fleet owner. I got to see it from the lens of a fleet executive. So I've been able to see it from a lot of different perspectives, and one of the things that I can appreciate with doing that is when you see things outside of one perspective, you get a better understanding holistically on what you're looking at. So I think that was a really, really impactful part of my journey, is the ability to kind of see it from a lot of different places. And I'm gonna go ahead and say what a lot of folks may be scared to say. One of the things that I believe too, wholeheartedly, is silence is a sense of complicity, and I think that it's important to have conversations, but most importantly, it's important to have dialogue that you may not agree with. You may disagree, and I think that for one thing I can tell you about this industry, we disagree on a lot of things, and I think that it's okay. I think being in disagreement is okay, but I'm going to go ahead and say what a lot of people are too scared or maybe too biased to say, is that this whole English language proficiency conversation isn't just about safety. It's starting to sound like who we want in trucking and who we don't. And that's where I wanted to start this conversation out, or this monologue out today. And yeah, y'all know, this podcast is framed up to to join great minds in the business, give everybody insights on what's happening in the trucking industry, give people the opportunity to connect with small carriers and fleet owners by what they're bringing to the table. But I'm gonna be honest with you today, I just want to use it as my platform to talk. I've seen things transcribe in this industry over the last, since COVID. So we can say over the last 4 years, things have been changing at a rapid pace. Some of those changes that have been coming at that rapid pace has really created a sense of frustration. And it's really a cultural movement that has taken place over the last 5 years. Oh, 4 years. 4 years. It feels like it's been 5 years, but just a little over 4 years. And just from the things that we see, when you pull up into a truck stop, and I was there, I get it. There are things that are happening out there every day that are questionable. A lot of those things and a lot of those questionable activities fall down to the lack of accountability and lack of structure within the FMCSA, who's a governing body of what we do on the highways every single day. The one thing that the FMCSA states more evident than anything else is that they're short staffed. You go back and you look at the data just since 2019, 2020, look at how many, and you can go and do the research, look at how many motor carrier authorities were actually audited with their new entrant safety audits, which is supposed to take place in that first 12 months. I can assure you that many of those um, didn't get audited within that first 12 months. Maybe it's 13 months, or some it went out to even further than that during the heart of COVID. The FMCSA is saying that they're very stretched thin. They're stretched very thin. The FMCSA has a regulatory guide of enforcement that is this big, but they have a support staff that doesn't meet what they need in terms of that, which is very, very unique in terms of enforcement. So I wanted to kind of frame that up a little bit just so that way I can kind of get my message into where I'm going. So stick with me where I'm thinking. So we see the FMCSA the FMCSA is understaffed, but they're heavily funded. They're heavily funded along with a lot of states are heavily funded. The FMCSA receives a lot of money each year to keep our highways and byways safe and to improve safety every year. Safety is the number one thing that as a organization they're focused on. But as a motor carrier should be what you're focused on. Safety is what makes the industry go around. Without safe transit, obviously goods and service, the goods won't meet to their destinations, and unfortunately, it could be a hazard to our highways and byways. So, safety is one of the primary things that needs to focus more than anything else. Is how do we make our roads safer? There's a variety of things that can be done to make the road safer. Whether it be through enforcement of regulation, to support within those regulations, to double down on those regulatory places that support these regulations. So I'm not a fan of more regulation. I think that at the moment, as the carrier community is, as the driver community is, we don't need any more regulation. So I want to make sure I put a hard line in the sand that we don't need any more regulation. We need more enforcement in the regulations that we have. We need heavier fines, heavier accountability to ensure that, in the beginning, that pain might hurt a little bit, but it's training our industry to become better. So when I think about that, I want to make sure that you understand that I want to talk about it. I want to talk about those two things. It's not about to pick a side, but I truly want to challenge what people think. One of the things about me, and as long as I can remember, I've never been the type of person to be idle in my opinion, which I have that right, and you have that right, and everybody else has that right to their opinion as well. I think that too, when it comes down to that, I think what makes us as a trucking community, which makes us unique, is the passions that we have. I can't think of any other industry that just is as passionate about things as we are. And when we get passionate about something, we rally behind it and we take that thing all the way to the bank. One of those things that happened recently, and when you go back to the Obama administration, there was a push to remove barriers. And one of those barriers that was removed was the Obama administration, the FMCSA at that time made the decision to say, hey, you know what? We are no longer going to call a English language proficiency roadside violation an out of service. It's just going to be an out of violation. So what that meant is Truck driver came through, whatever level of inspection was, it came through. They couldn't pass the English proficiency, which at that time it was probably just in conversation and just like, hey, do you understand what we're saying? Officer not understand it. Well, he's going to hit you with a violation and go about your way. Well, back in June of 2025, the Trump administration said, you know what? We're not going to do that. If you cannot speak and read the English language, then you are going to be out of service. We're going to take your truck and we're going to park it and you're not allowed to leave because that is considered a hazard to the motoring public. That part I agree with. I agree that, and this goes way back, right? This is before Obama. This is way back. This has been around for decades now as a rule that you have to be able to read and speak to be able to communicate with emergency personnel if necessary, but also be able to read our road signs, whether it be construction zones, whether it be clearance areas, whether it be, downgrades on mountains. You got to be able to read that, man. You got to be able to read and you got to be able to understand it in order to be safe. In order to keep the motoring public safe, you need to be able to understand and read that English language. I 100% agree that that should be the case. I remember going through, I remember the first time that I pulled through Black Mountain coming eastbound on I-40 in Western North Carolina. And I remember the very first time, it's just coming out of the gorge, it's not far from the gorge. And I remember the very first time there's a pull off, there's a mandatory pull off. And those that are out there that drive, you know what I'm talking about. There's a mandatory pull off right before you get to Black Mountain, and it's an informational board that has a red light and green light when it's time to go. But on that informational board, it tells you about the severity of the downgrade of that particular mountain, but it also tells you how many runaway ramps are there, where they're positioned, what the curves look like, what the speed limit, all that stuff. It prepares you to go down the mountain. And at that time, that was my first time seeing something like that. And I was actually grateful that I had that information, beforehand. Not that I was going to drive down the mountain like a fool, but, I'm like, oh, it's pretty cool that, they kind of, gives you those warnings. And, hey, you know what? That means I need to tighten up. And I think about the importance of that. I think about the importance of me being able to read that, me being able to go down that path and to be able to descend that mountain safely is because I'm able to understand what those warnings are in front of me. So, yes, safety matters. Yes, communication matters, but intention matters more. And we need to ask, why is this currently as a whole, is it communication or is it a tool to weaponize prejudice? What it really means. And before we get into feelings, let's get into facts a little bit. So ELP stands for English Language Proficiency. If you want to go through and read the executive order and read the details on the executive order, you can go do so. There is a actual document that the FMCSA put as a reading of that executive order and to provide insights with that. And what the FMCSA currently requires and how it's already part of the CDL standards. It's been part of the CDL standards. Now, it's been said, hey, you're no longer going to be held out of service for this. But in order to get that CDL, it's been part of the standards, right? There's been a lot of evidence that during that COVID time that there was a lot of companies, specifically CDL schools, that were circumventing that English language proficiency because hey, it's not an out of service, so that was being circumvented. I can tell you just from experience, man. I've been out in the field. I've been out there, and you go into a shipper and you go to a truck stop. You visit with carriers that I remember working with a carrier that I kind of find out they had almost 200 trucks and none of their drivers spoke English. That was a concern of mine. That was a heavy concern of mine. It was one of those things that I was like, in my mind, that doesn't make me feel easy. Now, one thing I will tell you is that particular carrier, from a safety rating perspective, their safety rating is not any worse than the national average. With 200 trucks. So I just wonder to myself, man, how in the world are they able to? That would scare me. Like if I go to another country and I would drive a truck and I'm not able to read signs or read directional information, and that would scare me. So that's the reason why I am pro ensuring that the ELP um, is an out of service in terms of accountability. My concern is where it crosses the line and it's being used as a frame of something else, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Now, I think tighter enforcement, more checkpoints should be the way to go when it comes down to it. There are states out there that are not enforcing the ELP on the executive order. There's states that are out there that are not doing that. I've seen conversation where they're like, "Hey, defund the states that are not supporting the executive order from the president." My issue with that is that you know I understand where that may be the case to fuel that, but the motoring public shouldn't be politicized. Why should a family of four in an SUV on a road trip on a weekend to go see grandma's house? Why should they be under that limelight of that unsafe carrier to going down the highway, um, because the state was defunded? I'm not saying that they're doing a great job with their funds, but why should that particular family of four be susceptible to unsafe carrier activity because the state was defunded just because they decided not to enforce the ELP, which amongst the other things that they've got to focus on as well, we shouldn't politicize safety. And the when you politicize safety and you divide the country on safety, I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that. I have a long-standing issue with that. So I don't believe that that should be the case. Do I have the right answer to a state that says I'm not going to enforce ELP? No, I don't. I have a wrong answer. And that wrong answer is to take money from that state that uses that money to put officers on the highways, that puts officers at way stations, that protects the motoring public and other things. I pulled up some stats and I'm gonna give you an example. Since June 20th to today, and since June 20th, there's been over 1,900 trucks put out of service for improper securement and missing securement. 2,000 opportunities to slam on the brakes, and that load shifts and that cargo repositions itself off of that trailer onto somebody's car. So when I think about the importance behind the enforcement, while it might not be enforcing the rule that you want it to enforce, but is it just saying, "Hey, that particular state's taking their foot off of the gas and everything," or is it just the thing that fires you up? Let's talk about that. And I know that this is the opportunity for you to state your feeling, and it's my opportunity to state mine. I said it in the beginning and I said it now. I'm a big fan of the ELP, and I think it's important to be able to speak and communicate in the English language just from a safety perspective, but it is bigger than that now. I've had the opportunity to sit back and read tweets. I've had the opportunity to sit back and read op-eds. I have the opportunity to sit back and watch people talk. It ain't just about safety, y'all. And if you're naive to think that's all it's about, You need to wake up because it's not. Non-domicile CDL, what that means, and if you go back and you look at the meaning of a non-domicile CDL, why they exist obviously is because that person either doesn't have residency in that particular state or through the immigration process, they don't have permanent residency. So they issue a non-domicile CDL, and that non-domicile CDL, I've seen some examples to where the CDL licensing process has missed the opportunity to ensure that they're doing what they do to protect and gatekeep our roadways. This is how I feel about non-domicile CDLs. I feel like in order to have licensing or any representation as a federal um, as a federal operator, you need to follow the federal guidelines in order to become that operator. Those federal guidelines are very clear. I think that as a federal operator, you have to follow the rules that protect all citizens, all people, all humans that operate in our 50, well, 48 continuous states, and you have Hawaii and Alaska. Non-domicile CDL too, and you think about it, most drivers with non-domicile CDL still have to go through the process. And I'm gonna tell you where the industry is going, and I'm gonna tell you what's happening. Non-domicile um, doesn't necessarily mean that they can't drive. I've seen some drivers that have been behind the wheel for 30 years that can't back to a dock straight to save their lives. I've seen people that can speak perfect English um, do things behind the wheel of a truck that they shouldn't. And for us to be blind to the fact to thinking that ELP non-domicile is the sole problem of the industry, I take extreme problem with that. And I'm going to tell you the problem that I have. The reason why I have a problem with that because it's not rooted in safety. Some of it is. Some of it's rooted in safety. Some of it is some people do a really good job of pointing out the flaws and the fraud and the web of conspiracies, and they're out there, and there's some bad stuff going on out there. Some of you are using it as a tool to fuel your prejudice towards people. Non-domicile as a whole, I don't think, and this is my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion, and so are you. I don't think non-domicile CDL should have ever been issued. We were never that bad. You hear truck driver shortages and all that stuff, but we were never that bad. We were never bad enough where we can take our hands off the wheels and lower our standards when it came to the CDL licensing process. The biggest change that I remember experiencing in CDL licensing came later on in my CDL in my driving careers when they start putting automatics in trucks. I wholeheartedly at that time felt like that was the beginning of the downfall of the focus on safety. And you get met with resistance. People talk about all of that. Well, man, it's better on the economy and yada yada yada. I'm not talking about that part. The reason why I thought that that was a change and where we're going in the industry because now you change the skill set and you reduce that skill set requirement from that driver to where you even go as far as put a restriction on that driver's license to say, hey, oh, they can't drive a standard transmission. Well, we'll put a restriction on their license, just like you put a restriction for glasses and say, yeah, they're still eligible to drive this truck. Just make sure that you put them in an automatic. I had an issue with that. I believe that even when I went through And when I was a trainer, we may have 30 people in a Monday class. It comes down to CDL training. Well, by the time those 3 weeks went by, you might have 10. 20 of them quit because they weren't able to grasp the concept of shifting that manual and being able to control at the same time. So that was a skill. When they said, hey, we're going to put automatics in trucks, now you remove that barrier, it makes it that much easier to drive a truck. But if you make things easy, but then also at the same time, you see trucks going down the highway with people on their phones on TikTok. You see people on the highways got one leg hanging out of the window. Like, these are your professional drivers. These are our professional drivers. Where's the outrage for that? The outrage now has the become whether or not you sound like you belong here. And the crazy thing, and I'm just gonna call it for what it is, and the crazy thing is that most people associate anybody that doesn't look like them, sound like them, when it comes down to having a little bit of an accent or your last name is spelled differently than a Johnson or a Wilson, that they're non-domicile. And you already put them into a bucket that they don't belong. Not that you have any evidence that just looking at someone and saying, okay, oh yeah, they don't, yeah, he looks like a non-domicile. That looks like a non-domicile CDL holder. Every time I see an accident, and let's not be stupid. Every time you see an accident or a picture of an accident on Twitter or Reddit, open up the comments. If you disagree with what I just said, I want you to go look at an accident. I want you to look at the pictures in a Facebook group. And I want you to look at an accident, not the driver. You won't see nothing about a driver, but just an accident. And I guarantee you that it's going to be in the comments. Somebody says something about a non-domicile CDL. Let's stop treating this like it's a safety focus, because I believe that it's much more to it than that. In some way, I'm not going to say all, but in a lot of cases, it's bigger than that. Here's where I draw the line when safety policy becomes a smokescreen for cultural bias. You know, the thing that I love about my life and the journey that I've taken is that I've met some amazing people along the way. Um, I have had the opportunity of working with some amazing teams on amazing projects. And the one thing that I appreciate most importantly is that the people that I work with and the people that I put in my circle, they don't look like me. They don't always sound like me. They don't always have the same ideas and the same opinions as I do. Let's not frame safety with a smokescreen for other things. I've seen it all. I've seen, well, I don't feel safe around them if they can't speak English. Again, at the beginning of the conversation, I told you what my stance was on the ELP. But I can't just look at you from 30, 40 feet away and say and determine whether or not you can speak English or not. That's a prejudice. The only way I'm going to know if you speak or can communicate in English is if I talk to you. I've heard they don't belong out here. Who's they? Are they people that just don't look like you? Are they people who you assume that are taking jobs from you just because they look different? I've heard that they look like they are a non-domicile CDL holder. Okay. What is a non-domicile or what does a domicile CDL holder really look like? Prejudice is when you when you formulate an opinion about somebody without learning and without understanding. Prejudice is also a form of ignorance. Ignorance is not a negative term in a lot of things, but ignorance is a term that is shared with you that shows a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding. To me, that this is turning this industry, and as I see it, and I've been silent on this for a long time. I've been silent from a standpoint that my words go a long way. I'm connected with a lot of people. I have I am speaking on the largest platform in freight. I'm cautious, but I'm not complicit. Yesterday, I had enough. Yesterday, I saw enough what I saw where to me, where we're going, it's not going down the path of safety. There's some people out there that say if you remove all the non-domicile CDLs and ELP violators that our roads will instantly become safer. Well, what the hell happened back in 5, 10 years ago when that wasn't the case? Why were people still dying on our roadways? Why were people still being hurt? Why wasn't our industry much safer then? It's just a question. It's a legitimate question that I'm saying I want a legitimate answer because if we're going to blame and if we're going to call out, this is the reason why our roads are not safe. Let's be fair. I just kind of feel like this is turning into a proxy war for immigration, race, and American identity. And I believe that trucking is becoming the battleground for it. You want drivers. You want good, safe drivers out there, but you just want drivers that look like you, sound like you, and were born within 100 miles of you. Is that what it is? That's not trucking, that's prejudice. And you got to be really careful when you claim that comfort that you're leaning on, that your real truths don't really showcase. So if you're nodding along with ELP movement, you better ask yourself, are you protecting safety or are you protecting what's comfortable to you? People are different, man. Um, you know, this is America. When you look at the country as a whole, America is a melting pot. And what makes this country what it is are the many different elements of people that go along into this country. I'm going to rehash and I'm going to restate what I stated in the beginning. I'm a big supporter of the English language proficiency. It has to happen. I gave you an example as to why it's important. However, I'm not going to sit back here and be quiet when some of you are just using that to veil your own ignorance and prejudice into it. I'm not afraid to say it. And if we don't start having these conversations, it's become that proxy. You can't scream that we're united in the industry and then you say, hey, you know what? But we don't want those that don't look like us that might be a non-domicile CDL holder just because of their way their last name is spelled. And then meanwhile, we have those instances where every single day accidents happen on our roadways because of a variety of reasons. And you know what's the crazy part about though that is? A lot of these accidents happen, whether it's fatalities, whether it's long-term injuries, is with people who speak perfect English. I don't believe that that's going to fix our problems. We're not going to be able to say, hey, you know what? We go in and then we immediately just remove everybody that falls under this ELP non domicile category. And upon removal of those people, our industry will immediately be safe again. It'll immediately be profitable again, and all of our problems will be solved. COVID, during those years of COVID, it brought a time where retailers got scared. Shelves were being empty. They had to restock. There were shipping delays all over the place. So retailers start to become more proactive in what they did. You know what happened during that time? They start doing what's called they did a massive restock and they tried to front load a lot of their inventories. What that did is that created an incredible demand for freight. They needed trucks to move all of this stuff and get it to the warehouses so that way they can make sure that if anything happened, they can get their products to their customers. So they did that. And you know what happened as a reflection of that? Our industry saw the highest demands in terms of freight volumes that we've ever seen. And we also saw the highest spot rates that we ever seen. As a result of that, trucking became sexy. Everybody wanted to go buy a truck. Everybody wanted to get behind the wheel of a truck and go see the money. The crazy thing is that during that time, it wasn't uncommon to see drivers making 10,000, 12,000, $13,000 a week. It just wasn't. It was because the demand for trucks were there. Fast forward a little bit, and people stopped buying all of the stuff that these retail companies put on the shelves. And what happened when they did that was the need for trucks started to wane off. That started one of the longest freight cycles, if not the longest freight cycle on a downward side that I've seen in my career. But it wasn't because of English language. It was because of the volumes dropped. It was because your worth as a truck lost value today from what it was back in the good old 2022s. It lost value because now that shipper can find 10, 15, 20 more trucks like yours. Back then, you might have been the only one around. So to go down that path, and there's a lot of people in this industry that I respect and I admire that I completely disagree with. And that's okay because what makes us as people smarter is being able to have dialogue with people that you disagree with. That creates diversity in your thought. Having a diverse perspective and diverse minds is so important. It also makes you more intelligent. I've never met an intelligent, ignorant person. I just haven't. And I don't think I'm going to start. When you think about the real risk, and the real risk that's in our industry right now, it's not from language. Is it important? Yes. Is that our major risk? No. The real risk is from the lack of access to fair, consistent, and true training. Proper credentialing is a real risk. Support systems is a real risk. These are the things that get swept to the side because of the things the easiest thing to hop on is something that's simple. The easiest way to to rally someone up is to distract them. If you love America, you got to respect the people. Again, I believe the ELP is important. Again, I believe that non-domicile CDL should have never been allowed, but y'all are using them for the wrong reasons. Some of y'all are using this whole thing to cloud a smokescreen, and maybe that's you. And you as a person have the right to be whoever you are and whatever you choose to be. Don't hide. Don't hide it behind this. Don't act like this is the real reason. The American trucking industry as itself has always been built by hands from all over the world. I don't care if you brown, black, white, purple, green. I don't care about that stuff. That stuff doesn't matter to me. I'm a human person. I love human beings. I don't, I think that, God made us unique for a variety of different reasons. And I think that more importantly, when we think about who we are really, we need to really think about that. You can't call yourself, believing in a higher power, whether you're Christian, what that may look like, and then have hate for the next person because they don't look like you or they don't sound like you, or maybe they got a little bit of an accent. I'm just calling it for what it is. I think that there's two truths. Yes, we need drivers who understand critical safety protocols and are able to communicate in the native language within the land. But no, we don't get to gatekeep this based on what we think just what somebody looks like. I remember as a driver, I used to have to turn my CB radio off. And if you don't know why, I don't have time to go into it today, but I'll tell you this. There's some ignorant people out there in this industry and just about any other industry. I will not allow my voice to stay silent on issues like this because you know what? I'm a grandfather, and at some point, that's the world my grandson has to live in. So if I had to take that risk and have this conversation with you, I ain't afraid to have it. I want you to really think about the real reason and the true reason behind that. Again, I believe the ELP is important and non-domicile CDL should have never been issued. But some of you shouldn't have a CDL, period. And you can speak good English. If you're a fleet owner, veteran CDL holder, you set the tone out here, man. I've seen some wild rhetoric on social media. One of the tweets that triggered me to have this conversation with you yesterday, and I hate to use the word trigger because this is not an emotional thing, but this was one of those things of saying, hey, you don't no longer need to be silent. And to paraphrase the tweet, it basically stated that when you look at the entire industry and you look at the accidents and the incidents that take place, these accidents and these incidents are not caused by a certain color. Number one, that's not true. You really want to go into data, which I don't want to go into, but I'm not afraid to go down that path. But number two, that was inflammatory rhetoric designed to further drive a divide between the people. The one thing that is crazy is that this is the United States of America. I've never lived in an environment w in my industry where it was divided down the lines the way it's divided. And if we stand complicit and stand alone, it's only gonna drive that wedge further. For us to get better, we have to move down the road and down the path the right way. If you're uncomfortable because someone else looks different than you, so the first thing that you go to is your go-to line is, "Oh, that's a non-domicile CDL," man, that's ignorance, and that's prejudice. You can call it for what you want. You can call me a liar when you walk up to that person and that person can't speak English. You can call me a liar when you can validate and verify that that CDL that's in their hand is a non-domicile CDL. One thing that you can't do, and one thing that you may be doing, and that's up to you, but when you assume, you know that makes an ass out of yourself. We have got to be careful, especially those with large platforms, especially those with influence. You gotta be careful. I'm a big believer that the ELP is important. I'm a big believer that non-domicile CDLs shouldn't have been issued in the form in the way that they have been. But also I'm a big believer in diversity. I'm also a big believer in when I say diversity, I mean diversity in thought. We can all work within an industry together. We follow the same rules, but that doesn't mean that we have to look like each other. That doesn't mean that we have sound like each other. Hell, some of you from here have the worst accents and you are from here. I think that just from that, I just want to leave you with this. Some of you are really, really showing your true colors. You're just using this as a as a gateway to be able to convey that. Understand this though. When the man upstairs made people, made humans, the term love thy neighbor, he didn't say that just when you were comfortable. So be careful. Be careful if your approach is to focus on improving the safety on the industry, then do that. Make sure you focus on that. If that conversation made you uncomfortable, good. If you ain't like it, good. You have that right. But I also have that right to explain to you my thoughts too. I'm not here to defend fraud. I'm not here to ignore safety. I'm here to say that if we don't confront our own bias, we're going to continue to build an industry that's hostile, divided, and smaller than it should be. To every owner operator out there that's doing it right, no matter you got a language barrier there, if your accent is a little different, or if you even look different, you're a different color. I see you. You're the reason why the freight moves. Let's do it rare. Let's hold each other to a higher standard, not to a smaller circle. And if you got thoughts on this, go ahead, reach out. Doors open. One thing that I don't back down is from a conversation. If nobody else will have this conversation, with nobody has, I will. Until the next time, this is a long haul where we just don't talk trucking, we talk truth.